Welcome back to the I Don't Want a Divorce podcast. Today's topic, Prodigals in the Bible, Part 1. The first three persons in the world were prodigals. This shows that the prodigal problem started right away, and God shows us how to deal with it. My new podcast series is based on my brand new book, Adult Children Who Break Your Heart. This book is available only on my website, davideclarkephd.com. We didn't even ask a Christian publisher to publish this book. All right, we are self-publishing these days because I can't stand the editing process with a publisher. I can't stand waiting a year for the book to come out, and I can say exactly what I want to say, all right? And I like that. I get input from Sandy, my blonde, Phil Dukas of Dukas Creative, Nancy Dukas of Dukas Creative, and my podcast, YouTube, and TikTok subscribers. The information I get from you folks is awesome, and I appreciate that. And it's really gaining, I think it really helps all my content. Speaking of subscribers, see that subtle transition? If you want to join our team of biblical, edgy truth tellers, subscribe to this podcast and leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. Together, we're making a difference. Now, today's podcast, Prodigals in the Bible, Part 1. The Bible speaks clearly about adult prodigals. In fact, the first three persons in the world were prodigals. Not a great start for the human race. I focus on three prodigals in this podcast. First, Adam and Eve. Genesis 1:26 through 4:1. God created Adam and Eve and gave them everything. He put them in a gorgeous garden and provided for all of their needs. The best part was his daily presence with them. What could go wrong? Plenty, actually. Who could mess up this perfect scenario? Adam and Eve, that's who. And if we had been given the chance, we'd have messed it up too. God set clear boundaries for this husband and wife, Adam and Eve. He taught them right from wrong. He warned them about the consequences of sin. That's what parents are supposed to do. Adam and Eve rolled the dice and chose to sin, like we all do. When God discovered their sin, shocker, they sinned some more in their response to God. Adam blamed Eve, and Eve blamed the serpent. God did not accept their justifications, made it clear their sin was completely their fault, and delivered harsh punishment. They were kicked out of the garden, and their lives would be a lot harder and full of pain and effort. God continued to love Adam and Eve, however. He made clothes for them, he allowed them to start over in life, and he blessed them with children. He was not done with Adam and Eve, like he's not done with us after our sin. All we have to do is repent. Lessons. Despite all God did for Adam and Eve, they still chose to sin. Even though God taught them right from wrong and warned them that what would happen if they sinned, they still chose to sin, and he allowed them to. Free will. Adam and Eve had a perfect father, obviously, and they still chose to sin. Adam and Eve's sin could not be blamed on environment because their environment was perfect. Their sin could not be blamed on heredity because their father was perfect and they were created by him. Adam and Eve's sin was 100% their fault, and that's true for every single prodigal. Do not take any blame for your prodigal's choices. God confronted their sin directly and gave Adam and Eve severe consequences, but he maintained a loving relationship with them. He released them into the world where they could make their own choices. They could disobey him and suffer, or obey him and receive blessings. This is what human parents should do. Let's take a look at Cain now, third person in the world. Genesis 4, verses 1 through 16. Cain, the first person born on the earth, chose to bring God some crops as an offering. Knowing that was inappropriate, when God rejected his offering, he was very angry at God and his brother Abel. God called out Cain's sin and gave him the opportunity to repent and do the right thing. God said he had the ability to control his sin. Cain had the opportunity to repent right there. Cain's response was to murder Abel in cold blood. When God confronted him, he lied and refused to take responsibility for his sin. Nothing was ever Cain's fault. Let me read a few verses here from Genesis 4. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" Boy, what an attitude with God himself. The Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." Instead of breaking and repenting and, "Gosh, I'm sorry," what does Cain do? Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is worse than I can bear, is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land. I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. Well, Cain played the victim. He played the martyr. He was blaming God for the punishment he received. Whoa. Sounds like a lot of prodigals I've come across. When God told him his punishment, Cain had the nerve to complain and whine about it. He remained angry, bitter, resentful, and selfish. At no time did God blame Adam and Eve for their son's sins. God severed his relationship with Cain and released him to live the sinful, ungodly lifestyle he wanted to live. There is a time to sever the relationship with your prodigal, and I'll cover that, of course, in the book and in these podcasts. Lessons. Cain was the world's first narcissist. Like every child born, he had the opportunity to love and serve God. Absolutely. Clean slate. He chose to love and serve himself. Cain was responsible for his choices. Cain and Abel were raised by the same parents. Abel decided to live for God, but Cain decided to live for himself. You raise your kids in the same home, the same way. They each will choose how they will live. Cain offered no apology for his sins. He showed zero empathy for others. None. He had no desire to repent and follow God. This is the prodigal, not sorry. He was a liar. Cain blamed God and Abel for his sins. When God applied serious consequences, he played the martyr. Cain wanted to live life his way, not God's way. He chose to remain a prodigal, and God let him do that. You will confront your prodigal and provide the opportunity to repent. If he refuses, you will apply the consequences, and then you will let him go. All right, next time we'll wrap it up. I'll be talking about the prodigal son and a couple of real dirtballs in the Bible. So until then, Dr. David E. Clarke, PhD.com, signing off.